All right. Hello and welcome back to online English class. Today we are going to be looking at a tricky little poem by Emily Dickinson called "I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died" for OTN 5, a poem meditating on death, the immortality of the soul, and what happens to an individual when they die. This is Dickinson's personal perspective and meditation on this. She obviously is not a Christian, so her fears, her apprehensions about her oncoming death and what it might mean for her are articulated in this poem. Okay, so we'll look at that uh, through the course of today's analysis. All right, let's just quickly run back through the top of the week announcements. All right, so you should have completed your progress check yesterday. I've got some emails coming in about how to do this work more effectively, to answer these questions more accurately. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a video in the next couple of days, maybe this weekend when I have a little more time, in which I'm going to just answer some of those questions, screen record the process of me reasoning through some of those questions and talk about some of the skills that are being evaluated in the questions. To hopefully just give you another opportunity to practice and think through and be conscious about the ways in which you are answering these questions. Okay, so that's coming down the pike for those of you that have questions about that. I definitely want to work closely with you to improve your skills in that area. All right, so you just need to make sure that you're continuing in your reading of chapter 19, 20, and 21. This is going to be due Monday, next Monday, finishing OTN 4 and 5 by the end of the week. Okay, so at the end of the week, I just need a confirming email that you've completed OTNs 4 and 5. And then other than that, we're just going to be working on Lecture 7 tomorrow and then jumping into Gerard Manley Hopkins' poem, God's Grandeur. We're quickly coming to the end of this unit. All right, so more information about what your Unit 5 test is going to look like next week. We're going to be taking that test next week, okay? Let's go ahead and jump into your reading of OTN 5, I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. Okay, so our prompt, we just got one poem that we're going to think about for OTN 5. We're going to look at Dickinson's use of poetic devices, just generally speaking. Okay, this is about as broad as it gets in terms of a prompt. We're just looking at all poetic devices and how those poetic devices develop the thematic impression of the poem. Okay, so this is basically how I've structured these prompts, is just to be as open-ended as possible, offering you the opportunity to use a wide array of different analytical devices to get to some coherent reading of the okay. So we'll use all the devices that we've discussed up this point, and we'll definitely keep a sharp eye out for sound devices that develop the phonetic aesthetics or phonoaesthetics of the poem, which this poem does an excellent job of using. All right, which is why we're using it for OTN 5. All right, so as usual, let's go ahead and jump into an SQ3R. Sorry about my small writing. I try to write bigger, and then I just find myself writing the same way every time. I'm obviously just going to talk through this stuff if it's difficult to see. Okay, so we always want to survey the speaker, the title, and the genre and form of the poem before we get into it to just give ourselves a better opportunity to understand what the poem means on a literal level. Okay, so the speaker is kind of a tricky little part of the poem. It's like the speaker is already dead, and the speaker is looking back on the significance of her own death. Okay, which is weird. Okay, whenever we get to the meaning of the poem at the end, it's going to be weird. It's going to be paradoxical that the speaker is able to speak at all, but it's significant that the speaker is only able to say this particular message. It's like she's a ghost speaking this kind of riddled secret about what comes after death to her reader. And this riddled secret is Dickinson's own sort of meditation on her uncertainty, on her fears, on her apprehension that comes with the inevitability of her own mortality, of her own death. Okay, so it's an interesting poem in that way. It's also a deeply non-Christian poem in that way. It sort of cries out about the beauty and assurance that the believer has with respect to the promise of the resurrection, the promise of life beyond death. Okay, um, so the genre here is a lyric poem, and the form it's structured into 4 quatrains. Okay, and the lines alternate between tetrameter and trimeter, both iambic. This is called the common meter, so you can sing this poem to the tune of Amazing Grace or other hymns from the 19th century, the standard hymn meter. For 19th century Christian worship. Okay, so obviously Dickinson's not a Christian, and this poem is deeply not Christian. Okay, it's the apprehensions of an individual who does not believe in the gospel, looking forward to and thinking about their own death. And part of the tension or apprehension in the poem is embodied by each stanza's use of slant rhyme in the first 3 stanzas, right? There's sort of feeling or this tension evoked by the slanted rhyme. They're off. They're not quite right. And then by the final stanza, there is an exact rhyme. Okay, so that tension resolves itself when the speaker actually kicks the bucket, when the speaker actually dies. Okay, so those are some sound devices that Dickinson uses in order to help manifest the meaning of the poem. Okay, so what is the title of the poem? I heard a fly buzz when I died. Okay, just something I want to call attention to. The capital F fly here suggests that the fly is a sort of the fact that it's described as kind of personal, proper noun, the fly, right? It suggests it's a symbol or a representative of something like bigger than itself. It's not just a fly. A fly is also specifically or uniquely appropriate to a poem meditating on death because flies eat carrion flesh. It's basically they just eat dead stuff. Okay, that's what a fly does. Dead and decaying things. And flies are also just like annoying. They're distracting. They interrupt one's train of thought. They interrupt one's day. They interrupt. They're interrupters, okay? So we'll talk more about the first line when we get into the poem itself. Central question here we're going to be unpacking and exploring is how does the speaker's poetic style develop the poem's central theme or dominant impression? All right. Today I'm not going to answer this question. All right. What I would like for you to do is leave a comment. All right. Leave a comment on the YouTube video that articulates your thesis of the thematic impression of the poem in light of the analysis that we're going to talk through together in the next sort of 15 to 20 minutes. Okay? So there's our dominant question. Let's read the poem together quickly and just understand what it means on a literal level. All right? So first stanza, I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. Okay, so the image there just gives you just compares with a simile. We'll talk about this a little bit later. Compares the stillness or the peacefulness or the kind of the emptiness of motion in the room to the emptiness of motion or stillness between 2 massive gusts of wind in a storm. Okay. Which is a kind of counterintuitive or ironic image because storms are not very peaceful, right? They're not very still. The eyes around had wrung them dry, right? The eyes here just references to all the people surrounding the speaker who are slowly but surely being disembodied, slowly but surely sort of fading away to where her loved ones, the people around her deathbed, are sort of fading into eyes and breath. All right. So the eyes around had wrung them dry. Okay. So they cried all their tears out. Now they're just waiting. And breaths were gathering firm. Okay. So just drawing in breaths, sort of gathering up those breaths, stealing up one's courage for that last onset when the king be witnessed in the room. Okay. Who's the king? Right. When the king be witnessed in the room. Uh, well, it's left intentionally ambiguous here. I willed my keepsakes signed away what portion of me be assignable. Just literally what that means. It's a tricky little inverted way of saying that she'd given away everything that she could give away, that is hers, all the parts of herself that can be given away, all the physical, material parts of herself have been given away, and all that is left, right? The only thing that she has left is her soul. The only thing left that she has is her immortal soul, something she cannot give away. Okay, so she's ready to die. And then it was, there interposed a fly. Right? Interposed just means interrupted, or something that stands in between two things. With blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me. And then the windows failed. And then I could not see to see. Right. Let's analyze this poem in about 10 minutes together. Okay, so the first line uses a sonic device, a sound device that we talked about yesterday. It's called assonance. Okay, it repeats emphatically the I sound. I heard a fly buzz when I died. Okay, so in the opening line, very similar to the poem as a whole, right? I and die is interrupted by the fly. Okay, this emphatic repetition of the I sound draws attention to the individuality of the speaker and her expectation of what is going to happen to her when she dies. What is going to happen to I when I die? And then interrupting her expectation is this little interrupter, this little distractor, right? And it buzzes, okay? And the word buzz is an onomatopoeia, okay? It's a word that sounds how it means. It buzzes, right? It is annoying. It hums in one's mind, distracting a person, right? The stillness in the room. Okay, so this line evokes a sense that in the room there's a kind of peace, right? So conventionally, right, most forms of faith are meant to or offer the person of faith a kind of peace in the face of death, a kind of stillness, something that they can rely on. Okay, for the Christian, one relies on the resurrection of the body because of the atoning work of Christ. Okay, right? That's what's going to get you to the light. That's what's going to get you away from the second death, the death of the soul, the destruction of the self, okay, and into life eternal. Okay, so the stillness in the room, the peace in the room, was like. Okay, so here we have a simile, or an analogy, would probably be the more technical term, was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. Okay? So room and storm are something called a slant rhyme. All right, and the slant rhyme, which is a kind of rhyme that is oftentimes or can be also called off rhyme, right, connotes a sense of unease, okay, a sense of tension, like a dissonant note, right? It should have rhymed exactly, right? That would have resolved the scheme, but it's off just a little bit. There's tension there. Very much like, okay, the simile, so that rhyme, that off rhyme, that slant rhyme connotes the same impression and fortifies and solidifies the impression made by the simile, which likens the stillness in the room to the stillness in the air between heaves of storm. So storms are obviously not peaceful, right? Storms are sort of archetypical symbols, or obviously connote a sense of chaos, a sense of things being out of order, not at peace. So the simile is kind of ironic and counterintuitive as the speaker reflects on, right? So the stillness in the room that is not still, all right, reflects the internal lack of peace in the speaker as she is approaching her moment of death. Okay. The heaves of storm, okay, that word choice evokes a sense that the speaker is gasping for air, clinging to life. All right. Here, the speaker's internal and physical approach to her death is anything but peaceful. It's anything but tranquil. It's anything but assured. Okay. The eyes around had wrung them dry. Right? So the eyes is a synecdoche, just as breaths is a synecdoche, suggesting that, all right, her loved ones around her are fading away from her cognition. They are becoming eyes and breath. All right. All the parts of her life, okay, that were most meaningful to her, the people that are around her on her deathbed, are turning into nothing but eyes, nothing but breath. Okay. And those eyes have cried out all their tears. The time of mourning has come, or come and gone, and the time to confront the reality of what death is going to bring has come, okay? And everyone in the room, like the speaker, is gathering firm their breath, okay? So this word gathering firm evokes a sense that they, like the speaker, are sort of gathering up their courage. That they, although they perhaps would outwardly confess a kind of assurance in what's going to happen after she dies, right? She's going to a better place, or other kinds of rote recitations of comfort that help us gather firm our courage in the face of the mystery of death. All right, they, like the speaker, are less at peace than they perhaps ought to be. Okay, for that last onset. Okay, the word onset connotes a sense that they are being attacked. Okay, far afield from the sort of Pauline assertion that to die is gain, death is a friend to the believer. Here, the speaker and also those around her seem to approach death as if it is attacking them. Okay, far afield from it being something that is going to bring them great blessing. When the king, all right, capital K, king. Now, interestingly, right, the king is not named specifically, all right, leaving the identity of the king a mystery. Who is this king? Is it King Jesus, come to conquer death and claim the speaker's immortal soul and bring her to life everlasting? Or is it King Death, come to obliterate the individual, come to render the individual's existence null and void, the omnipotent king of the material world? Right? So this king is going to come, this ambiguous, unidentified king. And notice the fact that the king is not identified helps reaffirm the lack of stillness, the lack of peace, all right, the lack of courage that's in the room. The king is going to come be witnessed in the room. All right. Once again, firm and room is a slant rhyme that again continues to manifest that tension in the room. So the phonetic aesthetics of the poem help imitate and manifest and make palpable this sense that the speaker, when confronted with the reality of her own coming death, is deeply distressed, not still. All right, I willed my keepsakes. Okay, so that word willed is a pun here. Obviously, before you die, you draft a will that gives away your earthly possessions to the people who continue to live. But it also signals the kind of act of the will as the speaker prepares herself for death the way that she has been trained to prepare herself. She is giving away willingly her earthly ties and her earthly possessions, trying to firm up, all right, her belief that she is going to be meeting King Jesus, not King Death. All right, so she's willing away her keepsakes. She's signing away what portion of me be assignable. All right, here she, in other words, right, she has given away all aspects of herself that are not spiritual. She has renounced the physical world in anticipation of, right, life eternal in heaven. Okay. But then, and then it was, there interposed a fly. So bee and fly, another kind of slant or off rhyme, which again, this sort of affirms the off-centered or tenuous or tense nature of the scene, even as the speaker prepares herself, all right, or tries to prepare herself for to meet death with peace, to meet death with calm and assurance. Okay, she is interrupted by this buzzing fly. Her meditation on, right, her encounter with the king is interrupted by, it is interposed on by the fly. The fly with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz. Okay, so these modifiers, uncertain, stumbling buzz, right, help emphasize the nagging uncertainty, the nagging doubts of the speaker about her own immortality. The buzzing of the fly and the interposition of the fly helps embody, right, the image of the fly buzzing around the head of this dying individual, right, helps embody the nagging doubts of the speaker as she here is confronting the thought that perhaps, right, she is not going toward life everlasting, but rather simply toward death and decay. She is uncertain. She is stumbling in her faith. And this uncertainty, this stumbling buzz, this interposition, this annoying cacophonous sound in this otherwise conventionally climactic moment in which the soul stands in between, on the threshold of the mortal life and eternal life. The stumbling, uncertain buzz of the fly stands between her and the light. The word light obviously connotes or is associated with heaven and eternal life. Walking into the light, walking toward the light. The fly interposes between those two things, this nagging doubt, this stumbling faith. And then the windows failed. Windows here is just another synecdoche. It's an implied metaphor comparing the speaker's eyes to windows, the windows of the soul. And the windows failed, which is to say the windows shut. They stopped letting light in. And then I, right, could not see to see. I, the self, the soul, the only portion of herself that remains is lost. She loses her physical sight. I could not see. She loses her physical sight to see. Her physical sight, which gives her the ability to be conscious or alive, awake, aware, right? As she loses her physical sight, she also loses her internal consciousness. Her mind's eye is shut in death. Her soul seems to have died. Now, it's kind of weird because for a poem that seems to consider the fact that Dickinson is afraid that when she dies, her soul will die, and that all of her will be lost, and that even though she tries to believe that she will live on, even though she tries to firm herself up and approach death courageously, that in the end, okay, she hears this nagging reminder that she's going to be food for the flies. She's going to be dead, gone, obliterated, and that it's not King Jesus waiting for her. It's King Death. And that is a fearsome kind of thought. But yet the speaker of the poem is some kind of immortal soul. That's a bit of a tricky thing that seems to undermine the reading. Perhaps it is just a decorative literary device, because how else could someone talk about their death unless they'd already done it? Or perhaps it is signaling yet another layer of uncertainty. Or perhaps it is signaling a deeper kind of desperate fear in which the speaker is only capable, the only message that she can offer to those living, the only secret about the nature of death that she can offer is that you will become food for the flies, and that you will lose yourself and your windows will fail. Perhaps that is what Dickinson is getting at. That's the reading that I tend toward. I think that's the reading that's most faithful to the text. What I'd like for you to do is try to articulate the poem's dominant impression in light of this analysis that we've worked through. What is the poem saying, right? What is the thematic impression that Dickinson drives toward with her use of litany, of sound devices, of imagery, of figurative language, metaphors, synecdoches, slant rhyme, and then finally, I didn't mention this, the exact rhyme at the end here releases the tension. Right? She's dead. The poem is over. Her fears are relieved, even as they are affirmed, it would seem. Okay? Interesting, tricky little poem. It's a nice little interpretive challenge. For those of you that are more interpretively bent, this is a great little one to really dig into and to think hard about. I'd invite you just to see if you can develop a reasonable reading that's faithful to the text and articulate it accurately in your comment. All right, have a great day.